Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to AI Deen Vision's historical journey through the Ottoman Empire. Today we explore a critical transitional period in Ottoman history, the reign of Sultan Selim II from 1566 to 1574. Often overshadowed by his legendary father, Suleiman the Magnificent, Selim's shorter reign marks a subtle but significant shift in how the empire functioned. Following in the footsteps of perhaps history's most accomplished sultan, Selim faced the monumental challenge of maintaining an empire at its territorial zenith. His reign forces us to examine fundamental questions about imperial governance. What happens when territorial expansion reaches its natural limits? How does leadership evolve when a different personality occupies the throne? Join us as we explore this pivotal but often misunderstood chapter in Ottoman history, one that would establish patterns of governance lasting for generations. Early life and character. 1524 to 1566. Born in 1524 to Sultan Suleiman and his beloved wife Hürrem Sultan, Selim was never expected to inherit the throne. His elder half-brother Mustafa was widely regarded as the most capable successor, but Mustafa's execution in 1553, amid complex court intrigues possibly involving Hürrem's influence, dramatically altered Selim's prospects. Following the deaths of his brothers Mehmed and finally Bayezid, executed in 1561 after an unsuccessful rebellion, Selim became the heir apparent. Unlike his father's rigorous preparation, Selim's education emphasized culture, poetry, and the arts rather than military affairs and hands-on governance. He developed a reputation for appreciating wine and leisure, behavior that violated Islamic principles but was somewhat tolerated in elite Ottoman circles. European observers, often hostile to Ottoman power, emphasized this aspect of his character, disparagingly nicknaming him Selim the Sot or Selim the Drunkard. This characterization has dominated many historical accounts, yet Ottoman sources present a more nuanced view. While acknowledging Selim's less martial character compared to his father, they also recognize his administrative competence and diplomatic skills. As provincial governor in Konya and later Manisa, Selim showed adequate administrative abilities. He maintained correspondence with his father on matters of governance and developed relationships with key officials who would later support his rule. He also cultivated artistic and literary circles, becoming a patron of poets and scholars who would contribute to Ottoman cultural development during his reign. Selim's marriage to the Venetian-born Nurbanu Sultan, originally named Cecilia Venier Bafo, would prove consequential for Ottoman politics. Highly intelligent and politically astute, Nurbanu would become an important power behind the throne, establishing what historians later termed the Sultanate of Women era in Ottoman governance. Transition of power, 1566. When Suleiman died during the siege of Shaygatvar in 1566, Grand Vizier Sokollu Mehmed Pasha orchestrated one of history's most remarkable political maneuvers. Recognizing the potential for disarray if news of the Sultan's death spread while the army was still on campaign, Sokollu kept Suleiman's death secret for nearly 3 weeks. The Vizier continued issuing orders in the Sultan's name, had the Sultan's personal physician visit the imperial tent daily, and even arranged for meals to be delivered. The army completed the siege successfully, capturing the fortress shortly after Suleiman's death, never suspecting their leader was no longer alive. Meanwhile, messengers were secretly dispatched to Selim, then in Kütahya, informing him of his father's death and urging him to secure the treasury and the capital before any potential rivals could emerge. Selim moved quickly to Istanbul, where he secured the support of the Janissary Corps with the traditional accession bonus, Kulus Basisi. When the army returned from Hungary, Suleiman's death was finally announced, and Selim was formally proclaimed Sultan. This remarkably smooth transition, orchestrated by Sokollu Mehmed Pasha, demonstrated the institutional strength the Ottoman system had achieved under Suleiman. Unlike earlier succession crises that had threatened to tear the empire apart, Selim II's accession was accomplished with minimal disruption. Upon taking the throne at age 42, Selim made the politically astute decision to retain his father's key officials, including Grand Vizier Sokollu Mehmed Pasha. This ensured administrative continuity and leveraged the expertise of officials trained under Suleiman, while signaling to the empire's elites that radical changes were not forthcoming. Governance style, the beginning of delegation. Selim II's reign marks a significant shift in Ottoman governance patterns. Unlike his father, who personally led military campaigns and actively participated in the imperial council, Selim largely delegated these responsibilities to his Grand Vizier, Sokollu Mehmed Pasha, an extraordinarily capable statesman who had served Suleiman in his final years. This delegation was not necessarily a sign of incompetence, but rather a different approach to rule. Under Selim, the empire was effectively governed by a triumvirate consisting of Grand Vizier Sokollu Mehmed Pasha, managing state affairs, Selim's wife Nurbanu Sultan, handling harem politics and succession, Joseph Nasi, a Jewish physician and financial advisor, directing economic matters. This arrangement established what historians call the beginning of the Sultanate of Women period, where imperial women exercised significant behind-the-scenes power, and the Vezirate government, where Grand Viziers became the de facto rulers of the empire. Sokollu Mehmed Pasha, a Christian-born Devsirme recruit from Bosnia, who had risen through merit to the empire's highest office, effectively managed day-to-day governance. His exceptional administrative abilities and deep experience with both military and civilian affairs made him indispensable. Selim's willingness to delegate authority to Sokollu created a governance model where the Sultan reigned while the Grand Vizier ruled, a pattern that would persist for generations. Nurbanu Sultan emerged as a powerful figure in court politics, advising her husband on appointments and succession planning. Her influence extended beyond the harem, as she corresponded with foreign diplomats and maintained networks of information gathering. Her Venetian background particularly influenced Ottoman-Venetian relations during this period. Joseph Nasi, a Portuguese-born Jewish banker and merchant who had fled Inquisition-era Europe, became Selim's close confidant and financial advisor. Appointed Duke of Naxos, the first Jewish noble in post-classical Europe, Nasi directed commercial policies and diplomatic initiatives, particularly regarding European affairs. His influence demonstrated both the opportunities for non-Muslims in Ottoman service and the empire's pragmatic approach to talent. This delegation of authority represented an adaptation to the realities of governing an empire that had reached its territorial limits. The Ottoman state had grown too complex for direct sultanic management of all affairs, necessitating specialized expertise and institutional development. While contemporary and later critics saw this as the beginning of imperial decline, it might better be understood as an evolutionary adaptation to changing circumstances. Selim did not entirely abandon sultanic responsibilities. He regularly reviewed and signed important documents, received foreign ambassadors, and made key appointments. Court records show his interest in legal cases that came to his attention and his intervention in matters he deemed important. Nevertheless, his less hands-on approach contrasted sharply with his father's more activist style of governance. Military affairs under Selim II. Despite his reputation as non-martial, Selim's reign saw several significant military campaigns, although he personally led none of them. The most ambitious was the conquest of Cyprus in 1570–71, motivated partly by Cyprus's strategic position and partly by the influence of Joseph Nasi, who some historians suggest may have been promised governorship of the island. The Ottoman forces successfully captured this Venetian possession after a difficult campaign. The Cyprus campaign was carefully planned and executed under Sokollu's direction. An Ottoman fleet of around 360 ships carrying approximately 60,000 troops laid siege to Nicosia, which fell after 6 weeks of resistance. The fortress of Famagusta held out much longer, eventually surrendering in August 1571 after a year-long siege that depleted Ottoman resources and resolve. The campaign's conclusion included a controversial episode where the Ottoman commander Lala Mustafa Pasha executed the Venetian commander Marco Antonio Bragadin after promising him safe passage, an act that violated Ottoman traditions of honorable treatment for surrendering enemies and damaged the empire's reputation. The conquest secured Ottoman control of the eastern Mediterranean but provoked a powerful response from Christian Europe. Pope Pius V organized a Holy League combining the naval forces of Spain, Venice, Genoa, and the Papal States under the command of Don John of Austria. On October 7, 1571, this combined Christian fleet met the Ottoman navy at Lepanto off the Greek coast. The resulting Battle of Lepanto was one of the largest naval engagements in history and a decisive Christian victory. The Holy League destroyed over 200 Ottoman ships, killed approximately 15,000 Ottoman sailors and soldiers, and freed thousands of Christian galley slaves. This marked the first major Ottoman naval defeat and shattered the myth of Ottoman naval invincibility. The psychological impact throughout Europe was enormous, with celebrations, commemorative medals, and artistic works celebrating what was perceived as a turning point in the struggle against Ottoman power. Miguel de Cervantes, author of Don Quixote, fought at Lepanto and later called it the most noble and memorable event that past centuries have seen or future generations can ever hope to witness. Yet the Ottoman response demonstrated the empire's resilience and resource depth. Under the leadership of Grand Admiral Kilik Ali Pasha, the Ottoman navy was completely rebuilt within 6 months, a testament to the empire's vast resources and organizational capabilities. By 1573, Venice was forced to sign a peace treaty acknowledging Ottoman control of Cyprus despite the Lepanto victory. As Grand Vizier Sokollu allegedly told the Venetian ambassador, "In defeating our fleet you have singed our beard, but we have cut off your arm." In the east, Ottoman forces under Lala Mustafa Pasha fought a series of inconclusive campaigns against Safavid Persia. While no territory changed hands, these campaigns maintained Ottoman prestige in the region and secured the eastern frontiers. In North Africa, Ottoman influence expanded as the Corsair states of Algiers, Tunis and Tripoli came more firmly under Istanbul's authority. These semi-autonomous provinces provided naval support, engaged in commerce and served as projections of Ottoman power in the western Mediterranean. Economic and financial developments, Selim II's reign coincided with significant economic challenges that would have long-term implications for Ottoman finances. Global economic patterns were shifting dramatically due to the influx of American silver into the world economy through Spanish conquest, creating inflationary pressures throughout Eurasia. The Ottoman currency, the aksi, experienced devaluation during this period, with silver content reduced in 1569. This debasement reflected both fiscal pressures and the empire's integration into global economic patterns. Prices for basic commodities rose, creating hardships for urban populations and fixed income groups like soldiers and religious officials. Trade patterns were also shifting. The Portuguese circumnavigation of Africa had opened alternative routes to Asian markets, gradually reducing the Ottoman Empire's role as middleman in East-West trade. While the immediate economic impact was limited, these changes began eroding a key source of Ottoman prosperity. Selim's administration responded to these challenges by increasing tax efficiency, developing new revenue sources, and attempting to maintain price controls in urban markets. Joseph Nasi's financial expertise proved valuable in navigating these challenges, though long-term structural issues remained unaddressed. The empire's vast territorial extent continued to provide economic advantages. Control of key agricultural regions in the Balkans, Anatolia, and Egypt ensured food security. Diverse manufacturing centers in cities like Istanbul, Bursa, Damascus, and Cairo produced high-quality textiles, ceramics, and metalwork for both domestic consumption and export. The integrated Ottoman market remained one of the world's largest economic zones. Cultural and architectural developments. Despite being less remembered for cultural patronage than his father, Selim II continued Ottoman traditions of architectural and artistic development. His most significant architectural commission was the Selimiye Mosque in Edirne, designed by the great architect Mimar Sinan. The Selimiye represents the culmination of Sinan's career and is considered his masterpiece. Its dome, slightly larger than that of the Hagia Sophia, creates an atmosphere of extraordinary spaciousness and light. The mosque's 4 minarets, each with 3 balconies, dominate the Edirne skyline. The complex included a madrasa, Darul Qura, Quran recitation school, timekeeper's room, and outer courtyard. Ottoman literature continued to flourish during Selim's reign. The Sultan himself wrote poetry under the pen name Selimi. Though his verses did not match the quality of his father's work, he patronized important poets like Baki, who remained the preeminent literary figure of the age. Manuscript illustration reached new heights of sophistication. The Sename-i Selim Han, chronicling Selim's reign, contains some of the finest examples of Ottoman miniature painting, particularly battle scenes from the Cyprus campaign. These works combined Persian-influenced techniques with distinctively Ottoman compositional approaches and subject matter. The decorative arts maintained their excellence during this period. Iznik pottery production continued at high volume, with distinctive floral designs in turquoise, cobalt blue, and the famous Armenian bowl red that had been perfected late in Suleiman's reign. Ottoman textiles, particularly silk brocades from Bursa, remained among the world's most sought-after luxury goods. Scientific and intellectual life showed signs of the conservatism that would later characterize Ottoman thought. While mathematical and astronomical work continued, there was less innovation than in earlier periods. Medical practice maintained its high standards, with hospital foundations continuing to provide care throughout major Ottoman cities. Religious affairs and Orthodox Islam. Selim II's reign saw increasing emphasis on Sunni orthodoxy and the Sultan's role as defender of Islam. While maintaining the empire's traditional tolerance toward non-Muslims, there was greater attention to enforcing Islamic norms within the Muslim community. The office of Seyhul Islam Grand Mufti gained prominence during this period. Ebu Suud Effendi, appointed by Suleiman and retained by Selim, continued codifying the relationship between Islamic Sharia law and Ottoman administrative law, Kanun. His legal opinions, fatwas, addressed numerous issues arising from the empire's complex religious and ethnic composition. Sufi orders remained influential throughout Ottoman society, providing spiritual guidance, social services, and connections between elite and popular culture. Selim maintained the imperial tradition of supporting Sufi foundations while ensuring their practices remained within bounds considered orthodox. Education expanded through the establishment of new madrasas, theological colleges. These institutions followed standardized curricula focusing on religious sciences, logic, rhetoric, and law, producing the religious scholars and judges who staffed the Ottoman judicial system. Court life and succession. Planning. Selim's court maintained the elaborate ceremonies and protocols established under Suleiman, though with subtle changes reflecting the new sultan's personality. Contemporary accounts describe more frequent entertainments and less austere atmosphere than during Suleiman's later years. The imperial harem gained greater political influence during this period, particularly through Nurbanu Sultan. She carefully managed the education and positioning of her son, the future Murad III, ensuring he would succeed his father without the fratricidal struggles that had characterized earlier successions. Selim had numerous children, including at least 7 sons and several daughters. Dynastic marriage alliances continued to bind powerful officials to the imperial family. Daughters were strategically married to high officials, creating networks of influence and patronage that strengthened central authority. Ottoman succession practices were evolving during this period. The older practice of sending princes to govern provinces as training was gradually being replaced by the cage system, cafes, where princes remained in the palace under supervision. While this reduced the risk of provincial rebellions, it also limited princes' practical experience with governance, a change that would have significant implications for later sultans' capabilities. Foreign relations and diplomacy. Ottoman diplomatic efforts during Selim's reign focused on maintaining the empire's position amid changing European power dynamics. The Franco-Ottoman alliance continued, though with less active military cooperation than under Suleiman. Relations with Venice remained complex, moving from relative peace to war over Cyprus and back to negotiated settlement. The peace treaty of 1573 required Venice to pay a significant indemnity and recognize Ottoman control of Cyprus, demonstrating that despite the Lepanto defeat, Ottoman diplomatic position remained strong. With the Habsburg Empire, a peace treaty was renewed in 1568, though frontier skirmishes continued along the Hungarian border. Both empires, recognizing the costs of full-scale war, preferred to maintain an uneasy peace while focusing on other priorities. Relations with Poland and Lithuania were generally positive, with mutual interest in limiting Russian expansionism. Commercial agreements facilitated trade between Black Sea ports and Polish markets, benefiting both economies. The Ottoman Empire maintained careful neutrality during the French Wars of Religion and the Dutch revolt against Spain, recognizing opportunities to benefit from Christian Europe's internal conflicts. Diplomatic correspondence from this period reveals sophisticated understanding of European political dynamics. In the east, relations with Safavid Persia remained tense but largely peaceful during Selim's reign. Both empires, having tested each other's military capabilities in previous conflicts, maintained frontier defenses while avoiding major confrontations. Final years and legacy, 1573 to 1574. Selim's health declined in his final years, possibly exacerbated by his reported fondness for wine. Contemporary accounts describe him becoming less active in governance, delegating even more authority to Sokollu Mehmed Pasha and the Imperial Council. On December 15, 1574, Selim died after reportedly slipping in the hammam bath at Topkapi Palace. The accident, possibly caused by a stroke or seizure, ended his 8-year reign at age 50. He was buried in a tomb adjacent to his father's at the Selimiye Mosque complex. His son, Murad III, succeeded to the throne in a smooth transition orchestrated by Nurbanu Sultan and Sokollu Mehmed Pasha, who maintained his position as Grand Vizier. This continuity in leadership helped preserve imperial stability despite the change in Sultan. Selim II's historical legacy has often been unfairly diminished by comparison to his father. European historians particularly emphasized his less martial character and alleged personal excesses, creating the caricature of a dissolute ruler presiding over the beginning of Ottoman decline. More balanced historical assessment recognizes that while Selim lacked his father's exceptional personal qualities, his reign maintained imperial power and adapted governance to the realities of an empire that had reached its natural territorial limits. The delegated governance model established under Selim would enable the Ottoman Empire to endure for centuries despite numerous challenges. The Cyprus conquest represented a significant achievement, securing Ottoman dominance in the eastern Mediterranean. Despite the Lepanto setback, Ottoman naval power recovered quickly, demonstrating the empire's remarkable resilience and resource depth. Perhaps most significantly, Selim's reign established evolutionary adaptations in Ottoman governance that would characterize the empire for generations to come. Greater delegation to viziers, increased influence of the imperial harem, and more complex bureaucratic management, rather than direct sultanic rule. Sultan Selim II's 8-year reign represents a critical transitional period in Ottoman history, the moment when expansion reached its natural limits and governance began adapting to the realities of maintaining rather than expanding an already vast empire. Though often portrayed negatively in comparison to his legendary father, Selim successfully navigated the immense challenge of following history's most accomplished sultan. By wisely delegating authority to capable officials like Sokollu Mehmed Pasha, Selim maintained imperial stability and effective governance despite changing circumstances. His reign saw significant achievements, particularly the conquest of Cyprus, and remarkable resilience in recovering from the Lepanto defeat. The governance models established during these years, greater delegation to viziers, increased influence of the imperial harem, and more complex bureaucratic management, would characterize Ottoman rule for generations to come. As we conclude this examination of Selim II's reign, we must recognize that the patterns established during this period would profoundly shape the Ottoman Empire's future trajectory. The transition from direct sultanic rule to more institutionalized governance represented not simply decline but adaptation to the realities of managing a mature empire at its territorial zenith. In our next episode, we will explore how these patterns evolved further under Selim's successors, as the Ottoman Empire faced the mounting challenges of the 17th century, a period that would test the resilience of the institutions established during the empire's golden age. Thank you for watching this episode of Rise and Fall of the Ottoman Empire on AI Deen Vision. If you found value in this historical exploration, please support our channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing with fellow history enthusiasts. Enable notifications to be alerted when episode 13 on the 17th century Ottoman Empire releases. Your comments and questions are always appreciated, and they help us improve our content. Until next time, this is AI Deen Vision, illuminating history to understand our present world better. Allah Hafiz.